Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or not Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Oh my gosh. Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management presents. Can you tell I work on a few shows on this channel? Sorry. Scott, how are you doing today, sir?
Fantastic. I'm good with however you want to introduce us, Chris. We're just excited to be on your show. A pleasure being part of your experience in the live stream here.
No, thank you.
Good. It's almost to the point of the year that we call not summer here in Austin. We have two
almost
seasons. We have summer and not summer. So this is like you kind of get a chance to open your windows, just briefly get a breath of fresh air and that sort of thing. I know you guys get a bit more of the seasonal thing.
We have 5 seasons here. We have, the normal winter, spring, summer, fall, and construction season.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Keep you on your toes. I thought it was going to be like extended winter or.
No. There's only a brief bit of time you can actually do like real foundation laying in the summertime here.
That makes sense. So I am joined, as you can see, by a full cadre of the senior leadership here at RHACM, as we like to call it, Advanced Cluster Management. I'm going to do just a brief round of intros just so we can get through that. I don't know where everybody lines up on the left and right, but I've got Jeff Brent, who's the product management director based down there in South Florida. You can see the glimmer of sunshine and clouds on his face. I have our VP, IBM fellow, the man who leads automation and management. That's Dave Lindquist, right there. I've got the senior director and lead for engineering across RHACM. That's Kevin Myers. You guys both based down there in Raleigh. And then I've got Josh Packer, our senior lead architect based in Toronto. As you can see, he's got the Open Cluster Management shirt on, which is awesome. And I don't think Michael Elder needs any introduction. I think he's been on the show a few times, and many of you would recall that one time when his house was actually on fire and he was in the midst of demonstrating DR scenarios with ACM, which was awesome.
Not on fire, but the alarms are going off. Pretty hardcore.
I'll say the demo was on fire, but yeah, your smoke alarms were definitely making us alarm.
That's the right speed.
So I think what we want to do, Chris, is kind of, we embarked on your show a year ago. This is our 10th episode. I'm thrilled that you've kept inviting us back. Thank you.
It's great to have you.
We're talking about new features and new functions. We're coming off of AnsibleFest. We've got a 2.4 release coming up. We've been very active in the upstream and a lot of push on our CNCF proposal. There's also kind of this whole market, what's happening in the automation and management space. And that's why I kind of wanted to hang out and bring Dave in today, who really leads a lot of that tone and sets the plan and the agenda for what we're going to do. So I'm going to turn it into Dave's hands here to kind of give us the lay of the land of what he sees as RHACM in this space today.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you, Chris, for inviting us to the show. The fun discussion on seasons earlier. I think we have almost all the seasons covered here between Florida, Texas, the Carolinas, and Canada. We have quite a bit of coverage. And the weather's getting nice here, that's for sure. Advanced cluster management, hybrid cloud. We've been in this space for a few years now. We've had the advanced cluster management capabilities available as a Red Hat offering since late last year, third quarter, I think, is when we introduced 2.0 of Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes. What we have seen through the years, and it just keeps heating up, is as customers accelerate their adoption of cloud, in particular their investments in hybrid cloud, we see a continued, almost accelerating focus on how to manage, how to automate these environments, how to secure these environments, how do enterprises do this at scale. And that's really what we're all about. That's what we're investing in, is how to allow customers, enable customers to bring OpenShift and their Kubernetes to their enterprises for production workloads across hybrid environments, across multi-cloud environments, with the management they need, the automation they need, and the security, and the security they need for their businesses. We put a lot of focus on cluster lifecycle, easing the support of clusters through their full lifecycle, on applications, how to manage applications and the complexity of applications deployed across clusters, within clusters, and all the dependencies that creates. Governance, risk, and compliance, how to really lock down with consistency the configurations, support the various compliance activities that are required for different businesses, regulatory requirements. So that's been an acute focus of ours, particularly around policy and opening up the policies and integrating with many of the security systems that are available for containers and Kubernetes. And observability. How do you get a view of all of the environment of your hybrid cloud? How do you define your hybrid cloud? How do you deploy it? How do you update, upgrade it? Where are your clusters? Where are they deployed? Managed environments or self-managed environments by the customer, as well as any alerting and events in the health of the environment that's been deployed. So that's been the core investment we've had, Scott and Chris. It's the adoption has been outstanding. The growth of the adoption has been outstanding. The reception we're getting from the industry on the open source, as well as partners coming into the ecosystem, have all been great. With that, why don't I shift over a little bit to some of the demand we're seeing and the growth we're seeing and opportunities to Jeff Brent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dave, when we talked about scale and scale, and particularly to the container management journey. A lot of our customers are doing from modernizing applications, being more efficient. We've really have learned a lot through the pandemic and agility and being able to meet the customer needs, change new business models, adjust very quickly. Our platform from a management perspective is all about scale, being able to do that. 1 cluster to 2 clusters to 3 clusters to hundreds of clusters. In fact, one of the really exciting things we've been doing on a scale front is supporting our telco customers and the scale that they require for rolling out their 5G efforts. So we've got a lot of scale and a lot of the things that I'm very proud of, and I know that we do from an organizational perspective. As we look at the market, our market is a lot like us, our own development organization. We have a group of components and capabilities, as Dave just listed there, broken those down into pillars and then further in the squads. And those squads are really delivering at scale a Kubernetes-based application, bundled and delivered as an operator, running on top of OpenShift. And we've taken advantage of the opportunity to eat our own cooking and to really take a look at how we as an organization innovate and are able to deliver at that scale. We have a tremendous scale issue within our own development organization for testing our platform on really anything and everywhere that OCP supports, and OpenShift and our support for the star KS that we call them, EKS, AKS, IKS, GKE, those out there. So we've got to spin up a lot of clusters. We got to make those clusters available to our development teams for their own development efforts, getting them those clusters consistently, being able to roll out configuration through GitOps. That's exactly what our customers are trying to do on a daily basis, whether that's core banking application or fleet management for our logistics customers, or even the rollout of 5G and the virtualized RAN infrastructure. So we're taking and embracing our market and our customers' requirements and really applying those to our own engineering effort. And Kevin is very much involved in the thick of that exercise for us.
Absolutely. And I think it's an exciting opportunity as we think about some of the concepts around operate first, being maybe, you talk about eating your own cooking, but being your own first customer, almost allowing the team internally to understand what it's like to try and use the tool on a day-to-day basis gives you a really unique perspective that, as we expand more and more the types of things that we're making available on console.redhat.com and cloud.redhat.com, the opportunity behind the scenes to use ACM to manage at scale really bring a lot of insight into the day-to-day experience and how we can make things easier for our end customers.
I remember some of the topics we've delivered just on that point, Kevin. We started talking about cluster pools, I want to say in like November of last year. And we sort of set the seed. We planted the seed. I'm sorry, I'm using a different metaphor. Maybe we were starting to acquire the ingredients, the recipes to begin eating the cooking. And yeah, it's matured over that time. We started to see developer, the dev tooling adoption of using the cluster pool, establishing the pool of machines that they could take out. And that's exactly what our developers are using today, stamping out and claiming those clusters. I mean, Josh, you have a routine. I think it's like Monday of every week, you stamp out a new hub. It proliferates through GitOps, it proliferates the managed clusters, the applications, the policy definitions that are defined around that.
Exactly.
Before you even get out of bed and put on your slippers, like that's already happening automatically. So it's just kind of fun. Like, as Jeff was reminiscing about the past year and Dave was talking, through the story of how we got to this point. But Kevin, your embrace of that concept, of those concepts, and really educating us in terms of how we do operate first, how we bring these tools into our hands as the way to really solve it. You've seen, building in Submariner, bringing additional engineering and staffing around that capability as we expand the pillar of multi-cluster networking. You've seen opportunities galore in that space and beyond to bring more in-house, and how we do that upstream and how we deliver that downstream. It's pretty interesting to also hear your points of view on how we continue to grow in that space.
Yeah, well, I think there's a tremendous opportunity, both with Submariner specifically, and as we think about things like service mesh, and anytime we're able to bring an ability to start to control the interaction between application elements, it becomes an exciting opportunity for us, especially at scale, especially multi-cluster, multi-cloud. We are talking to more and more customers that begin to have, it's taken a while, but I think as the Kubernetes deployments have matured, the complexity of the types of applications that people are trying to manage there have matured as well. And so their need for us to bring more to the table that allows them to manage at scale, and do that in a way kind of like Josh does every day, do that in an automatic way so that, when capacity is not being utilized, it's put to sleep. When it's needed, whether that's a time of day or that's based on load balancing and capacity, our ability to bring that up, integrate it in seamlessly into the application and make it available. It's been really powerful. It's also, just transparently, it's been a huge part of us trying to figure out how to control cost as we try to think about like the number of different places where we want to run our tests to make sure that things are rock solid on every platform. When we first started out, it's like, I'm going to spin up these clusters, I'm going to leave them there, and I'll run some tests later today. Our ability to use cluster pooling to, arrest that capacity, but very quickly bring it back up when we need it, has been a tremendous cost saver for us, as we've expanded the number of places where we try to run OpenShift clusters. So it's been great for us internally to work on utilizing our own technology to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible, but also ensuring that our developers and our QE engineers don't need to wait around while we manifest new environments.
Building that into CI, into the whole DevOps routine, from soup to nuts as we do.
Yeah, instead of saying it's the perfect storm, it's like the perfect wave. We'll use a surfing metaphor instead, is that, we're building a product that's all about managing hundreds and thousands of clusters. And so, it makes sense to use that product in our day-to-day living as well as we do it.
So Jeff, early on, you were alluding to some of the different consumption models. Of course, we have RHACM. We also have OpenShift Plus. We also have capabilities that we're working on components and delivering and integrating with individual offerings. What can you elaborate for the audience on the different?
Yeah, absolutely.
About consuming these capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. We've as we've discussed, there's a lot of applications for this, and really it is a multi-cluster world. That's the theme. And with Red Hat OpenShift Platform Plus, putting together all those capabilities in the one box, including advanced cluster management, advanced cluster security, your registry with Quay, along with OpenShift as the foundational platform, that is basically the package that all of our enterprise customers need in order to be able to provide this true hybrid cloud experience across the on-premises and the managed cloud world. And that's one way that we provide the ACM capabilities to the market. The other way is obviously you can get ACM straight from the SKU if you already have some of those existing parts or a specialized need. But I think one of the things that's really exciting for us as an organization is how we've spent the last, I'd say, quarter or so breaking down and modularizing the ACM capabilities. And so it's a more composable type of platform with a foundational element that's going to be included into Cloud.Red Hat's backend for being able to provide multi-cluster capability, multi-cluster registry, an API set that's consistently used by serverless and our OpenShift Data Foundation team and Service Mesh, all those components that need to have a cluster registry and be able to provide a point of view of their services on the hybrid cloud platform. We're making that capability available inside the OCP box, so they have that consistent type of delivery and experience. And that's also something that we're really aggressively exploring for the overall cloud.redhat.com management experience, is being able to provide that there as well. That gives you a nice layered approach. It helps us, we call it a little bit of ACM light. So it's just the foundational elements, and then you can easily snap on top the rest of ACM for the broader use cases and really fill out the box that way.
What's been neat too, Jeff, just to dovetail it, our name is Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes. So we've been marching to that drumbeat, building things into the product like the import and management of those clusters, being able to pull cluster health metrics. That's a new one that we're bringing out in 2.4 coming up in a few weeks. And that's a great feature that illustrates to the users that we have to have this fleet point of view. I can't just only worry about one cluster here and one cluster there. I have to have star KS monitoring. So we've listened to customers, we listened to accounts, and we said, yeah, we can pull cluster health metrics off those clusters and we can bring that in. And I think that starts to illustrate sort of our problem statement. Josh, I'm going to tee you up here because I know you've been working a lot on storage and business continuity. How do we manage those workloads that have business critical application and PV data? Those aren't just running on one cloud or not just running on one platform. We need to get into that spot where we can manage those across cloud, across platform, across distribution. And that's always been part of our central theme here. Things that we need to do, we pull in Ansible if we need to. And we make that, we do the automation across different platforms, or we just pull in the metrics like I just explained. We can bring those off of the star KS and start to bring those into the fleet view. Josh, can you bring me up to speed on what you've been working on in the storage space and some of the tools in that area?
Absolutely. So let's take over the screen. So we're not just looking at us anymore. And I promise this is the only slide that I brought to the stream today. And then we'll be playing with live systems going forward. But the backup and restore is a little hard to show in the short time frame that we have. But so ACM is getting involved in collaborating in the storage spaces now. And so one of those is around our DR scenario, which is the main point of this slide here. And so up until this point, you could still recover ACM. There was a GitOps scenario that would allow you to do that. It was actually, not to do a plug, but there's a video, one of our customers demoed it at Summit this year, where they had two ACMs running in different data centers, and they are able to move their workload from the management of their workload from one ACM hub to the other at a moment's notice as needed for DR. And so building on that and working with feedback that they had on that process, we were bringing a full backup and restore capability that can kind of be run in two different modes. One is the GitOps scenario, where Git is still your system of truth. So everything that's applied out into your fleet is still in Git, and that gets applied on the left and the right in Data Center 1 and Data Center 2, as you see in this slide. But we also have it for those day zero that maybe haven't quite got into the GitOps yet and have been using our UI, which creates all the resources for you and allows you, through a few clicks, be able to provision, be able to import, be able to deploy applications and create policies. We have a backup that is able to capture all those resources that are part of ACM proper, and through a an external store, because you always want that external store when the data center disappears, God forbid, to be able to push it into the other one. And you can restore all of those bits. So you can do it with a GitOps flow, in which case those bits are repetitive. But if you haven't quite got your journey going, or you're in a hybrid model where you got some stuff in Git and some not, we're able to take all those bits, back them up, and restore them. And then the key part, which was a bit of the pain point when we were doing this in 2.3, was the reconnecting of those managed clusters. That's now an automated affair. And so if you have 2 clusters, they'll automatically reconnect. You have 10 clusters, 100 clusters, technically 1,000 clusters as well, assuming they're all up, the hub is going to reach out and reinitiate those connections and connect them back to that management hub. And I guess the other key point to stress in all of this backup, this is just for that single pane of glass management plane. The workloads themselves, both when you're using us or you're using the OpenShift GitOps for applications, as well as the policies that are applied, all of that keeps running on the managed clusters, even if the management plane is experiencing an outage. So if your production teams technically it's your development team, is making commits to change the versions of their software and then merging that through your pipelines into the production repos, all those clusters in the fleet, they're still going to service those apps based on the instructions you've given, even while you're doing that failover of the hub. So from a business continuity perspective, the applications stay up, helping you meet your SLO. But we also offer a quick way to get that management plane. And once it comes back up on the other in the other data center, it just reconciles all of the changes that are there, and again brings you back to that one pane of glass. So that's the backup and restore side of things that we're bringing to the table in 2.4. The other one is more of a building block unit, and we're kind of excited to see how our customers and the users decide to do with it. And we've got some examples of things we do with it as well. And that's VolSync, which was previously known as Scribe. And so this is a community, it's out there in the community. It's an open source project that ACM is now bundling and supporting as part of our offering. And what that does is get down into the nitty gritty of storage. In the past, when we've come here and talked, we always talk about dynamic apps and being able to move them around. Everybody who's watched the stream knows that ACM is able to put it onto 1 cluster, 2 clusters, 10 clusters, and present that pretty topology view that gives you that single pane of glass, easy description of those resources and show you where the problems are. Well, now we're bringing in VolSync, which allows us to also start to create replications for those PVCs. And so, if you're doing data-centric database work, you're still going to deploy, just using the standard approach, a Mongo database with a 3 replica set across your clusters, and ACM placement rules are going to help you do that. But when you have things like repositories that you maybe want to put on the edge, or you have file-based systems, or different types of, you're storing objects from your custom application on a PVC, VolSync is a way to replicate one-to-one or replicate one-to-many to your external clusters. So let's take a quick look at that now. Hopefully the screen is still there. And so some of the folks on it, is it big enough, or do I need to zoom a little more?
Looks good to me.
All right, they say it's visible, so that's all goodness. So we'll hop over here to our application list, and we'll visit DocuWiki. I figured it was time for a new demo app, since we're usually playing with Pacman and others, though we will visit that a little later. And so this app, we've got it deployed to 2 clusters. We can see there's a physical volume claim. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch out the root for the first page, and we see here that no topics exist. So I'm just going to do a quick edit, put something like Josh was here, and I'm going to save that. And we'll actually come back to see this complete, because replication is replication. It doesn't happen instantaneous. Right now it's set on a 5-minute sync. So every 5 minutes, the data gets backed up. And so it has some live implications. So it could be used for things like this wiki, where you enter it in one space and then you want to replicate it out to a bunch of other servers in different geographical locations. As well, it's got an opportunity here for migration as well. So if you want to move an app from one location to the other, the Volsync is able to take that PVC, replicate it, and then you can clean it up. And you only need 2 resources to do this, which is also part of the beauty of it. And those are, you have a destination resource and a source resource that you define. So we'll click over here to the other one, and we'll just do a quick refresh, and hopefully you guys see the fact that it did there. So we know that there's nothing there right now, but we'll come back to this in a little bit, and we'll see that it, hopefully I remember to come back here, but we see that that the replication has taken place. But I guess the point is this is one of those building blocks. And so we've got a bunch of examples, the DocuWiki being one of them, but we have MySQL. There's a few other database ones that we can replicate the PVC stores. And so we're kind of interested to see what customers are going to use it, as well as expanding this into other options for our DER strategy. And so that's one of the new pieces here.
Yeah, just to add there, it certainly is one of those building blocks, and people might be asking themselves, how does this relate to OpenShift Data Foundation? The way I like to describe it, there's a lot of different use cases for these building blocks, and to bring back that cooking analogy, right? In the ACM box, you have flour, sugar, and eggs, right? You could bake your own cake. What we're going after, working with the ODF team, is they're going to give you the cake, right? It's going to be more of a push button experience that allow for you to do a full DR scenario, leveraging their advanced capabilities in OpenShift Data Foundation. We felt it was important that you had this generic heterogeneous volume replication for any type of use cases that fall into different things that Josh has already described.
Absolutely.
This is a point where, like Josh said, you said the feedback helps direct the roadmap. That's 1,000% true. I mean, we listened to the community, and they said, well, we want you to bake in these tools. I don't want to have to go fishing for business continuity elsewhere. And the GitOps model that you've described and many of our customers are using is fantastic. It's got similar characteristics of recovery that you'd expect in these kind of scenarios. But a lot of organizations aren't there yet. And they need that traditional model and sort of that checkbox that says, yeah, I have my DR covered. And I'm seeing something like this because it's exactly what we want to be doing from PM and engineering, is taking that feedback, designing this and executing on it, and delivering it to market in ways that customers find immediate value on it.
Exactly.
I also think it's a important example of where we are often opinionated about some of the pieces that we put in or the things that we decide to snap in, and how someone might use it, but making sure that there's a level of extensibility so that customers that need to can extend on top of what we've already done, or decide that there's another option that works for them, but we've architected it in a way that allows them to snap in another alternative. I think it's an important way that we go about building this, right? So I think on an ongoing basis, we try and get feedback for where do people want the hook points so that they can make a different decision if they want to. But there's a lot of customers obviously that want to know Red Hat's opinion on what we think is the right way to go about doing some of these pieces, and where that's the case, right? We're both gonna snap it in and give you some examples out of the box about how in our own development we're using these pieces, or where we've talked to other customers, we've already have out of the box policies or other things to operate in a way that we think will be easy for other people to adopt.
Did that with Ansible last year, right? That was one of
and I think that's a place actually where we will continue, right, to figure out ways to integrate more tightly with Ansible and find where customers want to build automation into hybrid cloud applications for sure.
And I'm going to use that as my segue to the next section, which is Ansible integration in the Ansible portfolio. So AnsibleFest just went by. It was this past week. Their ACM was there. We were demoing some of our integrations into more of our pillars. We see all the pillars actually listed over here. So way back in the day, I actually, when I heard we were doing this, I went looking, but I couldn't find one. I was looking for some screenshots from like way back in the 2.0, just so I could put the title screen up, the what it looked like back then and what it looks like now. But I couldn't dig one up. I guess I needed to look a little deeper into my Google Drive. But anyways, we started with application. That was our first foray, but we've now expanded that into our cluster lifecycle lifecycle pillars, as well as our governance, risk, and compliance pillars. And so, as you can see, Ansible is slowly growing to all parts. And that's because automation is key. I mean, we talk all the time about fleet management. We talk about Git being a system of truth, but really there's pieces that need to glue that all together in a coherent way and a repeatable way. That's what Ansible automation is for us. There's also the fact that as much as I wish everything in the world was Kube, there is a whole portion outside the cluster that you still need to interact with. And Ansible is a key integration point for that, mainly because there's a huge library of tooling that exists to integrate with load balancers, even server control planes, you name it in a data center, power systems, you name it in the data center, somebody's written an Ansible job or playbook for it. And if they haven't, 3 steps later, you've got one. And that's kind of the key point. And that'll come up a couple times as I'm walking through some of the Ansible pieces here. And we've demoed these in degrees of detail on previous Twitch streams, but we're going to touch on them again. So we'll start first in the cluster lifecycle space. And so here, what we've done is we've introduced the ability to put the pre and the post hook. It's very similar to the integration we had in the application space. We've got this new tab here on the left for automation, where you're actually able to create the template of what Ansible you want to use. And if you remember back, and we'll just create a test one here, you pick a credential. If you remember back to when we did this in the application space, you had to paste in a name of like a secret that you wanted. You had to paste in the name of a job that you were after in the previous release. That is all taken care of and automated now. So I picked a credential, which is defining a tower that I want to use, an Ansible automation platform tower. And then that is automatically, we reach out with that.
Yep. Can I jump in real quick here? Can you talk just a little bit? So here you're adding the job, you're talking about tower. What is tower? What is tower here?
Ansible Automation Tower is the centralized point for Ansible playbooks and automation. So most customers run 1, maybe 2 or 3 of these in the environment. And so this is the core store almost for all of that automation that you would use in your business, or you, depending on where your tower is, maybe the line of business. And so this may have things that we have demo jobs, but we have jobs such as an F5 publish, which is going to control the load balancer, or we have a Route 53 record, which is doing DNS modifications for deployments. And the ones I'm going to use in my demonstration is these ServiceNow tickets or playbooks that they're going to create tickets for us. And again,
I feel like that's a critical point, right? Because that central automation hub ultimately provides you a method of bridging into the container world, right?
Absolutely.
If you're a traditional RHEL admin, you're a traditional DevOps engineer, you might be using Ansible already in your continuous delivery pipelines or in operational pipelines, right, for runbooks or other activities. And here, what you're able to do is bridge out to that existing ecosystem of non-container workload and make it easier to bring in containerized workload and still leverage all of that existing automation behind it.
Exactly. And so we've accessing this, being able to set it up, we're trying to make it easier and easier. There's no cutting back and forth between the UIs to figure out what you want to do. All of that is in there. So you can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, as many of these as you want. If you're familiar with Ansible, you'll know you can supply additional variables that go with it. And then you can do that for both our pre-job and our post-job. And we support it in the install the upgrade space. You go through and you save that, and then that becomes available for any cluster you want to provision. So if we're over in the cluster space and we wanted to create a cluster, we've got all of our provisioned cloud and on-premise providers are the same as they were before, with the addition of, we have the new on-prem technology that's based on, it's called centrally managed here, but it's based on our assisted installer technology that we use, which is more of allows you to create more of a UPI style flow, because you've asked and we've heard and we've taken that feedback, and so it gives you that ability to build a more custom deployment methodology. It also is very well versed for, or well suited for, edge and single node cluster deployments as well. So here I'm just going to choose AWS, pick a credential. This is all stuff we've seen before, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'm just going to give it a name. The points I want to get to here is we have access to some new things like cluster sets, which is a new grouping concept that we're introducing. So you can join your clusters to a cluster set, and instead of granting your user access to individual clusters, you can grant them access. So a line of business can be granted access to a cluster set. Say it's development for front end, and all clusters in that cluster space would then become available, and you can set the degree of availability. So when you're assigning them to that cluster set, they could be view or they could be admin, etc. But the point I wanted to get here was actually to hop down, because most of this is already seen, but we have our new interfaces for proxy that we make available, so that if you're running behind firewalls that are needed to get to the internet or to specific repositories, that's configurable here, as well as automation. This is the piece where we just define that test, but where we'd be able to define or pick, say, the AWS ServiceNow. And so we're running low on time, so I'm not going to go deep into this. Just
we
to
can
say,
go over if we need to.
oh, okay. And so,
we might just be here into the evening.
And you can see I skipped. Yeah, as I was telling Scott, I could talk on this stuff. But so this will go off, and so this specific job says, "Uh-oh, something went wrong," but there it started working for us. Is going to go off. It's going to do the pre-hook, and so we have these new sort of install bars, so you get an idea, a picture of where you're at. It's going to reach out. We'll get the log in a minute. It's reaching out to that tower that Michael mentioned, and then it's going to instantiate a ServiceNow ticket, and that's going to wait. And it's going to wait for someone to go out and actually approve that said ticket. And so that's something we've been asked about a bunch before. How do we inject ServiceNow, or how do we inject a system of record where we need an approval? Ansible is one of the key ways that we can do that. You can also use this for more just push type of activities as well. So you could just push a ServiceNow ticket instead of requiring an approval. You could push a Slack notification. The sky's kind of the limit. There are thousands of playbooks out there of things you could do, both in your cluster as well as in your data center, and integrations as well. And if it doesn't exist, you build your own. Even for something like the ServiceNow, I've been using the ServiceNow example for a while to create a ticket. It was 2 extra lines in the playbook to add a check for the approval, so that it would wait on the ticket until it was approved before it went through. And so you can see here now we've jumped into the logs. And so you can, you launch out, it'll take you to the tower instance, and you can see the.
Real quick.
Yep.
I think the most powerful thing about this, right, is if you are a team providing clusters to developers or QE or others, and you're trying to create a more self-service experience, now this integration with Ansible gives you a method that you can still leverage your existing approval methodologies, record-keeping methodologies, et cetera, whereas everything around that approval, that manual approval, is completely automated, right? Even after you click approve, the rest of that lifecycle is going to create the cluster. The policies that you defined are automatically going to get delivered. Any backup restore policies are automatically going to get deployed. And so you still got that self-service experience for the developer, for the QE engineer, whomever, but it's tying it in automatically to the rest of your organizational processes.
Exactly.
All the things off cluster, all the infrastructure bits. Dave, you've been part of this journey with the Ansible story coming along. I know this is part of your purview and your domain. I mean, does this give you chills? You got to oversee, as Jeff calls it, the celebrity wedding. You got to see this come together across all of the pillars, but to really galvanize that message to the enterprise in terms of what they said they needed. Now it's here. Now we've delivered it. It's GA across all the pillars.
Scott, it's been great to see this come together. A lot of the leadership from Josh and Michael, and how these pieces came together between Ansible and ACM and OpenShift. All the points they're making just resonate so much with the customer base. I can't tell you how many customers have been asking us to slow down, show us how did this just work in the context of managing the cluster, deploying a workload into a cluster. How did the integration with all the processes, the IT processes that organizations typically have, from ticketing systems to networking systems to storage systems to security systems, often different parts of the organization. Now we can seamlessly integrate the cloud native container Kubernetes world with all the existing IT, the networking, storage, security, et cetera, and ticketing systems, the IT processes. which is fantastic. It really helps accelerate the journey that customers are on and modernizing their applications and then delivering these in production environments and scaling it across their business.
Time to value.
Time to value. Brings up a question I had, or comment for Michael. Michael, you've been a leader in the Kubernetes space for many years, as well as in the management space and in the communities. We're seeing how these communities come together in automation with Ansible and ACM, OPA with Gatekeeper, the GitOps space. From your perspective, what's the excitement going on in the core open cluster management space, and where are some of this headed?
Sure. So it's a great question. Ultimately, everyone on this call is already aware of this. So just to kind of share it for the audience, one of the key things that this team has been focused on is not just delivering awesome, neat capabilities that make it easier to manage clusters, but actually establishing a community around that technology. So all of the code, with the exception of one component, has been open sourced under github.com/openclustermanagement. And that is all of the code that largely has originated from Red Hat, and prior to that, IBM and IBM Research. And what we've been in the process of doing through literally the last year, more than that even, is taking the parts of the code that are maybe less centric to an OpenShift or to a Red Hat ecosystem, and putting those into a CNCF project proposal known as Open Cluster Management. So Josh has been kind enough to bring the site up. This is open-cluster-management.io. And ultimately, this CNCF project is currently in the evaluation phase. It will be evaluated by the CNCF steering committee. And our goal is to have it approved as at least a sandbox level project, so that not just an OpenShift-centric view of the world, but a Kubernetes and community-centric view of the world, other vendors can come in and contribute and drive consistency in this space. We've actually been hosting community meetings for Open Cluster Management that happen every other Thursday, and that's going back most of this year. I think maybe our first one might have fallen into December of last year. And that open community meeting is also on YouTube. You can go back and watch all of the history of the conversation. We've had contributors and interested stakeholders from companies like Ant Financial Group, who are using and deploying the Open Cluster Management Community Project today. There's conversations with adoption from AliCloud as well, and then students and other interested parties in the industry. But this is something I think is exciting because it's about trying to simplify how consumers leverage the open hybrid cloud, right? And doing it in a way that is not tied into a singular cloud ecosystem. So if you haven't had a chance to catch some of the community meetings, to try it out yourself, if you're not a Red Hat OpenShift or a Red Hat user per se, this hopefully I think still delivers lots of value. We hope that you'll see the value that we've built into the OpenShift platform in a way that's very consistent across every cloud provider, but ultimately anyone can come in and pick this up. You can contribute pull requests. You can look at what we're talking about in the community in terms of features and roadmap. But really, our goal here is to drive a multi-vendor, vibrant ecosystem around this set of concepts.
Nice. And we've seen that. I mean, some of the questions coming up in the Kubernetes Slack are interesting as folks get involved with workload and placement, and they're looking for features around, GPU, right? Like how smart can we get with workload placement, even down to the level of capacity that's available on the cluster, and is it available even down to the CPU metric, or even more into the GPU? So those types of upstream community engagement and activities, they're awesome. I appreciate Josh, your leadership, Michael, as an upstream contributor, and part of the steering of what we're doing in the CNCF proposal has been amazing to just watch that community come together. So hard, and not enough kudos are spread around to the team that's engaged there. But it's the right approach, and being part of Red Hat and seeing that vendor neutral approach has been very fun and very exciting. Kudos.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a cutting edge, and it's where it's where all the neat stuff is. Well, not all the neat stuff, but a lot of the neat stuff is happening, especially as Scott mentioned in the placement rule and the fleet management space. It's so we invite you to come out. There's free swag too if you come to the meetings. So come check us out. All
And
right.
maybe a key point, just to make sure it doesn't get lost. Everything, the only part that hasn't undergone open source has to do with the license and the search database component. But everything else that's shown, even if it's not part of the CNCF community project proposal, is still open source, is still available. So everyone, everything that Josh has shown here is available in upstream repos. You can go, you can take a look, you can file bugs, you can submit pull requests, you can help submit enhancements. But what's in the CNCF proposal is something that we think applies to every vendor. And ultimately, we want to see that, drive the community. But I want to reinforce that there's nothing here that is not open source.
Absolutely. And yep, we do everything in the open.
Exactly.
It's the Red Hat way, which is awesome. And that's been a lot of fun in the journey. Okay, I'm going to segue a little off Ansible here for just a second and take a talking point that Scott made and turn it into reality. And so he had mentioned around the star KS or the XKS, I've heard it referred to lately. It's a new label for me, but I've always been a star KS person. But we have the AKS and the EKS clusters that I've got imported here. Plus we do GKE, IKS. We do all the managed OpenShift. Got to put an OpenShift plug in there. The ROSA and the ARO as well. But I'm going to launch out the Grafana. So this is part of the Thanos package that ACM ships with. And I'm in the overall cluster health, which talks about a bunch of the clusters here. But we can see, so I've got my AKS cluster. If you were on the 2.3 release, you might not have seen that. But now in 2.4, we bring that to you as well. So you've got the AKS and you've got the EKS cluster stashed in here. I think I scrolled by it. And then you can individually look into them as well. We come with some pre-seeded dashboards, but you can choose additional ones as well. So we have the AKS cluster as well as the EKS cluster, and this works on the GCP as well. So all the flavors of Kubernetes that we've talked about in previous streams that we bring to the table that you're able to manage from a policy, an application point of view, an execute point of view. Well, now we've got the monitoring and metrics there as well. And so just filling in all those pieces to give you that full story, that single pane of glass across all of our supported Kubernetes targets. Yep.
I was just going to say, it was a great overview. It was absolutely driven by customer demand. And it was apparent, right? You want to be able to provide the fleet view. Okay, great. Go do that. We have to live up to the moniker of Kubernetes. So I like being able to do that. I like being able to prove that we're listening and taking the feedback and iterating on it with each release.
Absolutely. And so actually we were talking through it. I will show the screen once more just to show it. But so this was the ticket that was created from my original provision request. You can then go through the approval, but we're going to keep moving because I got lots of other cool things to show in this space.
One of the questions that came up there, Josh, though, was around the geo replication, and you might have even gone over this quickly, but you had two clusters, and I don't know where they were located. One was local, maybe one was in east and west, but
everything is out there except for the VMware. So VMware is in my data center or equivalent to in my data center. OpenStack usually in your data center, but all of these are all over the place. And you can look at the regional. So this one's US East, but my GCP, I think it is, yes, these are ones I provision in Europe. I don't pay the bill, so I put them where they need to be to look nice. But so these have the Europe West, and so this again, as you're targeting policies, targeting workloads, anything that's a label can be turned into a grouping of workload that you apply to your fleet. And so we can provision in all these spaces, we can manage them. Latencies obviously can be a problem, but under normal circumstances, we design for the fact that, we may have some delays here and there, but, on a daily basis, I manage my European as well as we have some Asia Pacific clusters as well, not in this specific hub, but in other ones, and we're able to do it.
Thank you. Feel free to pivot. I was just making sure we covered that live stream.
No, absolutely. And, we have the options here. You can see I've been a little tardy here, although I will maintain, I'm sure it came out in the last 3 days, but from this screen, I can bulk upgrade all of these clusters. We see they have the upgrade available. You can select the individuals. This has sort of been part and parcel for a couple of releases, but you can go to the upgrade and you get the list and you can make choices, especially if you have different versions. And you're also able to, this is automatically updated, just like any other update system. As the new release comes out, that day ACM gets the new level, but you can also self-curate these values if you want to control what goes where and the timeframes associated with it. So I'm going to go back to Ansible for a minute. I'm not going to go into big detail because there's still lots of other places to look, but I just want to show that, the integration there still remains. It's off and running and having problems. I guess it's a great demonstration that, when there is a problem, we bubble that up to the top. But so in our application space, we still have that pre and that post capability. I suspect this is actually because the systems all went to sleep. And so when it went to try and do stuff in the middle of the night, because systems were going offline, the placement rule will say, uh-oh, systems are off, I got to move, but I put all my systems to sleep. And so for Pac-Man at least, so those went away. It is kind of funny though, now that I mentioned that, I have two Pac-Man apps, one that we just looked at, which is Ansible, and one that is deployed by an Argo application set. Here, the segue sorry?
The Prehook Job Failure that's in the Pac-Man app, is not because clusters went to sleep.
It's no.
Now the instance goes down after 24 hours without being pinged.
Exactly. So to save money, I use a development service now instead of a production one.
A key point is that even though in this case the Prehook blocked it, all of the existing workload continued to run happily. The job didn't actually. If you poke any one of the deployments, right, for the audience to recognize that the deployments that are actually underneath clusters 1 and 2 below are still green and healthy. They're still running on the cluster. We're just reflecting that the Ansible job hiccuped in the run. And it's not uncommon. That's part of the point of automation, is that you can always rerun it if you need to, right? Like that's not, it didn't generate an outage because of that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it illustrates that is the whole point though of this topology as well, is to be able to zero in right away as to what the problem is. And well, it's pretty obvious that my Ansible job had an issue in this specific case. But what I was segueing to, because it reminded me of that with clusters going to sleep, was that my other Pac-Man app, which is actually deployed via an Argo application set, and this will be my segue, but it actually was originally on an AWS instance, but because all of my cloud instances go to sleep at night, the placement rule went, all of the clusters are down, but I'm supposed to keep one copy of this running. Oh, the only cluster left is the VMware cluster, so I'm going to move it there, which is where it's found its new humble abode. And if we click in, we see it's again a similar looking design. No, there isn't Ansible integration in this space at this point, but it's the Argo integration. You can take you to the Argo instance where it's running.
Instance, it's running on that target cluster,
right? This one is on the hub actually. So this is the OpenShift GitOps that was deployed by the hub, and then we have the other one that Michael mentioned. Let's see here. So we're also able to, and we've changed it around a little bit. It used to say Git here. We've got this discovered. So these are actually instances of Argo applications that have been deployed by a remote Argo on my fleet. So it had nothing to do with the hub. There was Argo running on each of my managed clusters, and we distributed the Argo application resource to all of those managed clusters, which then caused NGINX to be deployed. ACM, without having any pre-knowledge of that, detects it, also detected it all came from exactly the same source, which is Git, branch, and path. And so grouped them together to say, look, this app's been put onto all 7 of these clusters, which is why you see the terms remote discovery in there. But if we look at it from a visualization point of view, this one's going to give me trouble. Nothing like the demo guides to show their face. Let me try that.
I'll pull your head, Josh. I was going to say, just knowing about the discovery capability, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So what it should show you is you would get the same topology, and you can click into those and view the pods as well as the logs that go with it. We do display that, or usually display that, when it's not giving you a hiccup as it is in this. And so I'll use that segue then for, well, I said I have GitOps everywhere. Well, I used a configuration here in my policy in GRC. And so in my policy in GRC, I've got things like etcd encryption that we all always talk about. So that's making sure all of my OpenShift clusters have their etcd encrypted. I've usually run that in Enforce. I switched it to Inform and to provisioned a new cluster just so that we could see the error and that it actually does, we do detect problems. So one of my new clusters that I provisioned, which automatically, otherwise, if it was Enforced, would have got it, it's telling me, there's a problem. I need to go out and do that. We have the installation of OpenShift GitOps, which I mentioned, which is Argo. So this is pushing the Argo out to all of my clusters. I see Michael is got to drop. Take care. And I've also got ACS, which we'll talk a little bit about. We have an ACS integration as well as an enhancement to these policies themselves. You can now create policies that have templated values, and that's something new for us. It used to be you defined a very pre-canned set of YAML, and that was all that the policy was going to be able to check for. Well, now you can dynamically inject, using a policy template, things like names that you read off of a config map or a managed cluster, or even in a special case, you can use it to deliver secrets securely from the host hub ACM to your remote clusters. And so in the example here, we have the Red Hat ACS install. This has activation of ACS, which is Advanced Cluster Security by Red Hat. It also has delivery of what they call an init bundle, which is 3 secrets. And so if we look inside of this, and no, we're not going to be showing our secrets, thankfully.
That has happened.
And that's
not an easy fix.
I could believe it on a live stream. But that's kind of part of the core piece here is that fact that we aren't sharing the secrets. Instead, we've got, let me see if I can drag this over a little bit. We're able to build these query type of analogies inside of what is otherwise a secret. So if you look, the kind is a secret. It's got the name and the namespace that it wants to create, but the values themselves, they reference a secret that is stored securely that I'm not going to show on the hub in a namespace. And it's able to take those and securely deliver them to my remote clusters. And so this is a great, I'm getting started, I need a demo. I haven't yet figured out if I want to go all in and reprogram everything for Vault with sidecars, or use external secrets, or my security stance won't allow for sealed secrets, which would put it into Git. This is a great starter where the secret only exists on the hub. You can maintain and manage those secrets in a secure store that is mandated by your IT department. And for a delivery mechanism, we have a secure way where ACM is able to put those into a namespace on a remote cluster where it needs to go. And never do you have to commit any of that to Git. So I can commit the policy to Git and have it as part of my infrastructure and system of record. But I don't have to commit any port, any form, even an encrypted form of that secret into it. And so it's very powerful. As well, for ACS, we're standing up we call it an operand, but a resource that represents the agent. And that agent needs to have a unique name to register back. If you think back to what I just said, fixed YAML meant that every agent would have the same name. Well, what this templating allows you to do is, here we have hub, which means it's querying some data off the hub side, but you have it on the client side as well. So I'm able to look up the name of my managed cluster, use that in my resource that I'm stamping that initiates ACS. So when I hop over to ACS and it registers out, which I had the screen up here, and we go to health and we go to clusters, it's able to give the unique name of the cluster back for each and every registration that otherwise, you have to write some really fancy customized expression that you store in Git that you may or may not be able to debug. Now we've got a very simple template. It does the lookup, it applies the correct name for the cluster, and ACS is happy to register back and hook up. So, and that's kind of then segues into the beauty of ACM and our placements and our labels. Any cluster I import, any cluster I provision either through the full provisioning process or I pull out of a pool, as soon as it's registered into ACM and its labels become available, I could have something like placement for, which is what I'm using, where the vendor equals OpenShift. All of our imports, all of our provisionings, all auto detect that it was an OpenShift. And so they will all get the ACS client deployed to them. Same thing, because this is my demo cluster, they all get the OpenShift GitOps operator deployed to them as well. But so the power of the whole life cycle from, from that very initial point where you bring it under management, going forward, can be a completely automated procedure. And our placement allows you to do configuration, application, security compliance, monitoring. The whole gamut is covered in that one sense. And so, if anything, I want to summarize, what we've accomplished in the year. It's really that we've really filled in that whole picture. There used to be little gaps here, little gaps there, and that's why a lot of this was, we've gone from OCP only to StarkAS for metrics, or we now have Ansible in all three of the main pillars that you use where it makes sense to have automation. Is that a year later, having been at this, we've really filled in the picture, and it's come a long way as far as what we have is for the fleet management across all of the pillars of concern that we expect our users to be after. And so I will touch on one thing, just because it was a talking point and I love to prove they're there, is I want to just show the Ansible quickly that we've integrated here as well. So for something like, I created this policy here that's non-compliant. You see we have the automation, which matches up with the automation tab. And Jeff, you want to jump in while I'm doing this?
Yeah, I mean, you're flying through all these advanced features that we've just put in for 2.4, and that's because we have a little bit of time. But what I heard there, Josh, more than anything else, coming from the business side, is the first thing you do is you install ACM. And when you're an OpenShift customer or an OpenShift Platform Plus customer, install ACM is the first thing you do after you stand up your first cluster. And then I'll help you roll out ACS. It'll help you roll out the GitOps strategy. It'll help you roll out all the configuration policy and new clusters on top of that, as well as we've been dealing with a lot of customers that are migrating from 3x to 4. That's the first thing you should do on those migration scenarios. Stand up your first 4 cluster, put ACM on it, bring those clusters that are 3x under at least observability. Use cluster lifecycle to create new clusters. Create consistency of your configuration between the two. You have the templating thing that we went through real fast, both hub and on the policy side. It's really the game changer. One of the things that we hear a lot that we want to combat is, well, I don't have a multi-cluster problem yet. I only have a few clusters. And that is absolutely wrong. You don't want to look for, to use a Florida analogy, you don't want to look for the bucket to bail water after the boat's taken on the water, right? You want to have everything prepared and start with ship ready and put a multi-cluster world under governance, and that'll accelerate your cloud and your container adoption journey. Sorry.
No, absolutely. And so, we've got Ansible everywhere. And I guess to Jeff's point, and I'm sure we haven't actually done this in one of these streams in a while, when I start day one in an OpenShift cluster, I end up here. If I go to operator and I go to operator hub, and it loads, it's Canada, we're far away. You see the second card that we got up here is advanced cluster management. You click on this, you click install, you get the next page, and you go from there. I'm running dev, so it doesn't pop up in the same way. And within 8 minutes, you're running ACM. You've got an ACM console that you can hit. You plug in some cloud credentials, you plug in a vSphere credential, you plug in an OpenStack credential. You can, number one, you can start importing things, or number two, you start provisioning. You grow your fleet, especially when it's on-prem and it doesn't have the same cost associations. But even if you're in the cloud, we've got single node OpenShift that you can deploy. You want to keep it down. You can do 3-node master worker clusters. There's a whole bunch of different ways to slice and dice, how you expand your fleet. But this is there from day one is the best way to do it.
Josh is like a kid in a candy shop.
I absolutely
I
am.
always learn so much. Thank you, John. I'm going to kick it over to Dave to bring us home. This has been such an awesome session.
Josh, what can we say? Thank you. Awesome. Chris, Scott, thank you for hosting us. Scott, thank you for emceeing us through this. It's been a pleasure to rejoin the live stream here, Chris. I know everybody on the team, you can tell the passion, the energy and enthusiasm coming through the team. It's a hot space. As Jeff said, shift left, bring your management security right to the forefront with your deployments. Those are the most successful customers that we see, that we work with day in, day out. Community is growing rapidly. The integration points are growing rapidly. The adoption has been outstanding. The reception in the field with users has been outstanding. And we didn't even shift into a lot of the next wave of things, from event-driven architectures to the edge space. A lot coming, even in the area of AI. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
We get a chance to touch on cloud services and scale to the moon and beyond. We'll do it on a future one. Chris, thank you so much. We always enjoy this show. Thank you.
No, thanks for coming
Thank you.
on. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Y'all stay
As you can
safe.
tell, we got five more streams to give you, Chris.
Okay,
On
fair enough.
3.4.
This afternoon, this evening, tomorrow. Yeah. Cheers, guys. Y'all be good. Thank you.
All right, talk to
Stay
you soon.
safe out there,
Bye.
folks.
Bye.